50 years trapped drinking alcohol, solved in under a week. Derek, a retired professional, is now 27 months sober. He said within 24 hours, I stopped forever. No cravings, no willpower, just clarity. Alcohol had shaped Derek's life from age 15 onwards. Multiple failed attempts made him feel beyond help until he tried something different. I took Derek through my reframing approach and everything shifted. 27 months later, he's thriving. So what finally broke the cycle? And how did he eliminate cravings? Well, today that's exactly what we're going to unpack. Let's dive into Derek's amazing story and talk about the amazing results that have happened over the last 27 months. So guys, today we have got Derek joining us from Southeast Virginia in America. So it's now been 27 months since he started the program. When's the last time you went 27 months without drinking, Derek?
Well, not since I was 15 years old, let's put it that way. It's been a
Love it.
very, very long time.
Love it. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. So today, we're going to unpack your journey, the amazing changes that have happened in your life. And just can't wait for you to get this out there. So I appreciate you coming on.
That's my pleasure. I hope me talking about this will maybe help some other person who thinks, "Oh, well, I'm too old," or I'm too far gone." Let me just tell you from my personal experience, no, you're not. And it's worth it for you and for the people around you to do it. And I can't say that uh, more from my heart than I just did. So.
Love it. So let's start at the beginning, Derek. So how did alcohol become a part of your life?
Well, people often talk about how well is it your environment or your genes? And my response to that question is always yes, it is. And uh, because I sort of won and lost the genetic lottery. I come from a family that every male in it is major substance abuse problems. Uh, so that was a warning sign for me all the time. It was out there. I knew I came from that. And also the environment I was in because of those physical problems. It was a pretty dysfunctional family. Alcohol was everywhere. And, there's people, lots of people had worse. Mine was pretty bad. But alcohol was just part of your life. When there was a problem, you reach for a drink because that would solve it. And I started drinking real early, and I was 15. So, uh, that's kinda where we are. That's how you get started, and that was when I was 15 and, kinda continued on from there.
So when did you start realizing alcohol was a problem?
Well, like I said, I knew, I had my dad and his brothers. I mean, the example was there. I knew it. I knew alcohol wasn't great for you, but now we're going back almost 50 years here, and, people hell, at that time, we thought cigarettes were good, or okay.
Mm,
So you learn a lot, but over time, it just became clear to me that this wasn't good. I was actually trying to help my brother, if you look in my Kindle, there's I don't know, a whole bunch of how to quit alcohol or how to help yourself with alcohol. And in looking through that, it became pretty clear to me that yeah, he had a problem, but so did I. And from that perspective, it began to weigh on me maybe 20 years ago that, hey, this isn't good. Uh, and I did try to stop a couple of times, but like you quit for Lent or whatever.
mm,
And then what happened is as soon as it was over, you go on a binge. And you know, from my perspective, because of the work I did and the kind of things and people I was involved with, is I think what they call a high functioning uh, alcohol use disorder person. I always showed up for work. I was good at what I did, and around me were very good. and we kind of fed off each other in good ways because we collaborated and got things done. But there was also a big time function or an environment of alcohol, and you end up with a whole bunch of things that don't improve your relationship with alcohol, and that's kind of how I was getting through life. At that 20-year point, I started trying to quit, like I said, and that's when I began to realize that this is really freaking hard to quit
Mm.
this, really hard. And so, uh, as I looked through all the literature I had on alcohol and which ties into addiction and the relationship with alcohol and dopamine, that's when I began to realize that just how difficult this could be. It's a physical and psychological addiction, and the two they're intertwined. When you drink alcohol, uh, the dopamine, which is your feel good drug, uh, kicks in really hard, except it's like amplified far more than if you're doing something you really enjoy. Bungee jumper, that jolt you get when you go off.
Mm-mm.
That's dopamine. Well, when you put alcohol into that mix, you amplify it, and it's like an order of magnitude. It's not just a little bit. You don't feel a little bit better. You feel a lot, but then you get a crash, and that's why. And so you start chasing it, and that's you know that's why you get those types of problems. From my perspective, I was not the guy who was, you know, knocking back a handle of vodka a day, although I worked with some people who were. Um, I was a chronic kind of, I used to track my alcohol use, and I would look at it, and there's metrics in the alcohol use disorder handbook, if you will.
Mm-mm.
And I was always at least double what that was on a weekly basis. And if if it was a bad weekend, it would be a bit worse, maybe quite a bit worse. So that's kind of where I was with alcohol. It was a big part of my life, and but as long as I was working, there were breaks.
Mm.
And that was psychologically enough for me to overcome the urge to go over the edge most of the time, not always. But again, you do that for decades, and the amount of damage you're doing to your brain, your other organs, liver, of course, but it affects them all, and your sleep patterns. And you know, it, I'm still searching for that magical, this is why alcohol is good for you. And every time I look at one of these studies that say it is, uh, somebody who used to do some pretty good analysis, no, that's not a study, that's an advertisement.
Mm.
Anyway, what else would you like to ask me?
Oh, well, so you started realizing like 20 years ago that, yeah, okay, this stuff's not good. So then, and then it sounded like this kind of like it was causing some issues, but then you would have work where you'd stop for a period of time. So were there like specific things in those 20 years where you were like, that would drive you to want to stop?
Well, there were, like I say, I always showed up for work and tended to be in with a group of people who it's kind of funny. You say, well, so and so drinks more than I do, so everything must be okay. Well,
Mm.
that's a bit of self-deception, if you will. It became, as I got older, I started to feel the effects more, and I was starting to physically break down, and then as I was coming up on retiring, well, the brakes were off, or at
Mm.
least. And, you do that a couple of times, and then so I retired about 8, 9 months before I got into your program, and there was a couple times there I said, "What the hell am I doing here?" And I tried to I actually, approached a couple of these other programs and tried to go through them, and it didn't work. I think as you recall, well, you may not, it's been a couple of years, but when I talked to you, I wasn't real optimistic. And
I remember.
I think you had some hesitation about taking me on too because, uh, well, target demographic and all that, a bit older. Uh, but I did. And your approach was actually kind of similar to the way I had been going at it in a kind of a step by step, understand, first thing you got to do is admit you got a problem, try to understand the problem, and then try to figure out what you got to do to solve it and then execute it. Um, but the little bit of difference was having the skin in the game. I mean, your program is not free, but a lot of people, I think that is, well, for me, it was critical. You know, I talked to my wife about it, and she was kind of like, "Well, you don't drink that much," and that's really not true.
Mm,
uh, there's some things about alcohol, those of us who drink a lot, we're not always, real open about how much we're drinking, and a lot of times the people, even the ones that are very close to us, don't realize how much it is, other than maybe the rare outburst, and, so I'll just leave that right where it is.
yeah, agreed. I know exactly what you're talking about. So, yeah, and it's funny. Actually, earlier today, I did a call with Jeff, who is around the same time, about 2.5 years sober, and he said he didn't actually realize it until looking back, but he realized that he actually stopped the moment he decided to actually book a call with me and reach out for help. And he realized that that was the turning point with just actually going, I'm actually going to talk to somebody about this.
Well, let me tell you, the day I signed up with you, before I even got your stuff, I had stopped. That was the
Mm-mm-mm.
day. So Jeff and I have something in common, and that, maybe that's just what it is. But whatever it is, it worked, and that's for me the all important thing. It
Heck
worked.
yeah. Love it. So maybe describe like how different do you feel now compared to the times in the past where, the 20 years that you were trying to stop for? What was the difference? Like how do you feel now compared to them?
Well, so first thing right out of the gate, you start sleeping better because and it takes a little while, it takes a couple weeks, but you've got a lot of long-term damage your body's got to repair. In my case, because of the length of time and really the consistency, it was chronic abuse. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't the guy drinking a handle of vodka, which I consider acute, although that could be chronic as well. But I was long-term way over the limit, and it was an every night thing. And then with bursts of worse. Uh, well, when you take that away, I never had to go through like the physical DTs or anything like that. But you do go through. It takes a couple of weeks for your body just to flush the stuff out, and you start to feel better, and so that's good.
Hmm.
Uh, then I started getting back into working out a bit, and I lost weight. I lost 15 pounds, and I probably look people run into me now, and aside from the fact I've lost a lot of hair, uh, they say, "Wow, you really look good." And I feel good. So that's the all the upside. It doesn't make your life instantly better. All the relationship issues, all the, whatever problems you have are still there. But the important thing is you now are aware of them in a way you weren't before. You don't just slug back a couple of beers to kind of numb it and forget about it. And the next morning, you still got the problem, and you have capacity that you didn't have before to deal with issues. There are things that happen in life now that used to. I've got a very bad temper, and it runs in the family. I've known that for years, and I still do. But my ability to control it is about 100% better, and also my ability to deal with just everyday life and problems is better. Uh, my daughter had to move in with us, and you know, uh, I'm not sure I could have handled that many years
Mm.
ago, and now I don't need it. It's just part of life, you know. You just roll with it, and it's good. You speak frequently about, what's the upside to alcohol. Well, like I say, I'm still looking, and you might get a 15, 20-minute buzz out of that first drink. That's that dopamine hit kicking in, and boy, that feels good. But then the crash, when it comes down, you actually go below the dopamine level, and now your body says, "Well, hey, we got to go get this," and that's why you end up sitting at the bar at 2 in the morning looking for your next drink, and everybody else is gone. I didn't do that, but I know I worked with people who did. So,
Yeah, 100%. So, what else improved? So, you're sleeping better, you're losing weight, you're dealing with problems better. What else? Tell me more. Come on.
well, you start looking around at people, you start engaging with them more, and this is something I'm still not totally sure of. I believe my uh, persona or something changed a bit. I find that
Mm,
people approach me now uh, readily. I mean, maybe I just notice it more, but people will come up or stop or ask me a question or whatever. They don't hesitate. I have a feeling I might have looked pretty rough, maybe, or gruff, and you can be both. Uh, because I was always, coming off a bad night's sleep, slightly hungover or worse. And
mm.
now people, I mean, I'll just be walking in the supermarket and somebody will look at me and smile, or maybe I just notice it. I don't know. The fog you're in when you're coming off of even just a couple of drinks because you sleep so poorly. I mean, one drink will ruin a night's sleep. And that's a medical fact. That's not an opinion. And when you don't sleep well, you are not anywhere near as functional as you are capable of it and or should be. So that I think is a real plus. The wife and I have traveled. We've also, I've done a couple things on my own. She's done a couple things on her own. We're going to go, visit her cousin in Norway later this summer. In the past, I would have hesitated to do that because of, you don't realize how much alcohol controls your life. Anytime you're gonna go do something, you start thinking about, well, is there gonna be a bar there, or can I, will I be able to, and even at the lower levels, that's just something, I need that, I need those drinks every day, or I wanna make sure I got them, and if I don't have them, I get cranky. Um You take that out of your life and a whole bunch of things, all of a sudden, you've got a lot more time, and that's something, one of the programs I was looking at, uh, it involved taking a drug when I was trying to quit, and I didn't that didn't resonate with me at all. To me, taking a drug to it's like, what is it, methadone or whatever, they give it to heroin addicts. What do you end up with? A guy addicted to methadone. Maybe that's better, I don't know, never looked at it. But they had a glossy trifold, which was very professionally done, but they talked about the 5 thieves of alcohol, and one of them was the thief of time. The other ones were, everything you can think of that makes sense. It takes away your relationships, your confidence, and so on. But when you stop drinking, you gain time.
Mm,
And the important thing for me was that now I have this time, I've got to do something with it. And it took me a while to figure that out. Uh, but and it will anyway, because all of us, this is going to be a shift when when you quit and you're not, you've got to do two things. I think you've got to find something that you like doing, that you've been doing, and go a lot harder at it. You've also got to try to find something new that really engages you, and that's really important because you've got about a lot of capacity, and also you're chasing that dopamine hit. And if you don't find something that gives you that, um, you know, that's where you could maybe risk a relapse that kind of sneaks up. I have not felt that. I have had absolutely zero desire to drink. I don't mind being around drinking. We go to parties. We've been on cruises. I'm trying to learn how to dance. That's
mm,
if you knew me better, you would do more than just grin at that. You would be laughing your head off. But anyway, I'm just saying you're not missing out on anything by not drinking. You are not.
mm. And you brought up some really good points. Like I love what you said about how people talk to you more. Like it's like you're more inviting or something. And then,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was interesting. But then you said that you just mentioned this, like, so I like what you're saying because you're being realistic, right? You're saying that it's not a magic pill. Your life's still going to have problems. They don't just magically all disappear just because you're not drinking a drug anymore. They're still there. But then you brought this subject of time on, and it's true. Like, especially if you're retired, you're going to have a ton more free time and energy. So, what have you found we're not going to say substitute, right? Because there's no substitute for this, right? Like, but what have you found? Like, what have you been filling your time with instead of drinking? Like,
Well, I've been getting back more into fitness, which again, as an older guy, you gotta. If there was a point in my life when I was very fit, and that has served me well as I've gotten older. I found out that as I was recovering from injuries, which I induced on myself from doing things rather foolishly. You have to train differently and do it differently. But that's been I like to golf, and if you're going to golf as an older type, you've got to yeah, you don't get in shape playing golf, you have to get in shape to play golf, and so that's been important. I mentioned the dancing. That has been one of the most difficult things I've ever done, and I've done some pretty challenging things over the years, but it it's it's a totally new skill set. And the people that have been trying to teach me are pretty amazing. It it's a little funny. Taking a one of the trips I went on. I was in amongst some people who were maybe a bit out of my socioeconomic scale, but I fit in okay. And for whatever reason, a couple of them, they also stopped drinking, and they told me that I had inspired them and to stop, and that caused me a lot of um I didn't know what it was a strange emotion. I didn't know how to feel about that. I mean, because it was kind of like uh and I still have yet to really figure it out. I was maybe embarrassed, or I don't know, but I was so grateful that that had happened, but I also didn't really understand it.
this is post stopping, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, it
and
wasn't
I've
during
been very.
it wasn't during the drinking because then it would be quite offensive.
No, no, when we were, sitting down to a dinner and they came around, I said, "No, I stopped." And, "Oh, do you not drink?" I said, "No, I did drink, but I stopped." And at the time, I think I was a year into it. And we chatted a little bit. I was very open about it. And then about a month or so after the trip, they contacted me and said, "Yeah, we both quit. We're done." And you were a big part of it. And like I said, I was dumbfounded. So
That's that's it. You don't know who you're influencing. And this is the thing.
I
You can't
know.
tell. Yeah, you can't tell people to stop, but you can set the example. It's all you can do.
Well, and I guess maybe that's it. I don't really consider myself a good example. I consider myself a bad one in 50 years almost. So
Well, but that's
anyway,
the whole point, is that if you can drink for 50 years, struggle for 20 and still change, I mean, you're the perfect
yes.
example.
Yes. And that's maybe where I gotta kind of shift my frame of reference, if you will, a little bit. But yeah, it's
And I
been
think,
great.
yeah, I think one of the things is because we're doing this quite far into your journey, it's not like it was 3 months ago where you can remember all the bad things. Like it's such a long time ago now that everything's just completely normal. Like this is just how life is for you now.
Yeah, I mean, this is like I say, there's no urge to drink at all. Uh, there is an urge to, I guess, maybe try to do things better, and that gets a little frustrating at times because uh, I'm there's a couple. I'm doing a little bit of writing, and there's a few other things that I'm involved with, and at times I'm borderline ADHD. I think I'm kind of bouncing around so much, and maybe I need to be a bit more focused. But on the other hand, I've got a lot more energy than I used to have, and so there's good and bad, and it's always a matter of it's trying to develop good habits and good process vice. The old habit. Uh, Man, I look back at it and the habits I used to have, it was like clockwork. This is what I'm gonna do, and a lot of it was really bad. So
So without without trying to, I don't want you to sell the program. I want you to give your version of like how you would handle this. So if you could go back to your old self, the wanted to change but wasn't sure what to do, but they had the desire to change, what would you go and tell that version of you now?
what I will do is assume that I didn't have the life experience that I'd already had where I had been trying to help my brother and digging into things, and if you're someone who's just been drinking for a long time habitually, uh, and you wanna stop, but you're at a loss, your program lays out sort of a step by step. I mentioned it earlier, the first first rule of holes, you wanna get out, quit digging. Gotta recognize you got a problem,
I said, don't
and when
sell the
you do
program.
that yeah, well, I'm sorry. I mean, you this is where you gotta look at yourself,
Mm,
and, and if you're struggling, well, you need a framework. You need something that gives you, uh human beings love frameworks. That's what we survive on because the world is too complex for us to
mm.
just take it in and react. So that's what we do. We try to put things in boxes and so that we can work our way through systematically. Uh, that's that's what you need. I fumbled around looking for something to do that. Um, and you know, it took me a while.
Yeah,
And
I
and
think
by
you.
the way, knowing you have a
Sorry.
problem doesn't mean you can solve it.
Yeah, I remember I got a highly skeptical email from you saying I've bought this person's program and it was rubbish and he won't give me my money back. And I know what first principles thinking is from previous work, but I actually read it before we got on the call. I know what it is, but I'm a skeptic, something along
Uh,
those lines.
right.
Um, but I think you'd already done, a lot of like your own kind of analysis of how alcohol was impacting your life. I think you were quite far on in your journey mentally. And then it was kind of like for me, you just needed a few key pieces, and then it all just brought everything together for you.
You can have all the pieces in a puzzle on the table You might even have uh, the rough edges sorted out. But there's when you're doing a puzzle where all of a sudden things start coming together, and that's where that was sort of the moment when all of a sudden
Mm,
gears were grinding, they weren't meshing, the clutch thing, and then all of a sudden it slipped in, and the engine stopped screaming, and it started purring, and there it was just like, yeah, okay, yes, this is it, this is the way forward. Um, it's an everyone is going to be different, and everybody's going to have to find their own way, but the framework, you know, if you can get yourself into that framework and then you can start kinda it's almost like monkey bars when you're a kid, I'm here and I wanna go there. Well, you start swinging yourself along and you get into a rhythm, and the next thing you know, you're on the other side, and you say, "Well, that wasn't that hard." Well, yeah, that's because
mm,
you
mm,
were
mm.
hanging on one, bar at a time and doing it without, any sort of assistance, using the laws of physics and momentum to get you moving so you could get to the other side. Uh, your the stuff you've got gives that framework, meat. It puts meat on the bone, if you will.
So I think the I didn't want you to sell the program, man. But I appreciate these kind words. It's so lovely to hear. But I think the thing you're saying is, yeah, you got to admit you've got a problem, but then you've got to find a framework. So don't struggle on your own. Go and find something out there. It doesn't necessarily need to be this. It can be something else. And my mum, so my mum drank for
Yeah,
all those years, and she's gone to AA for over 20 years. That was her framework. And it is a
yeah.
framework. It's just not one that we want to use, but it's still the same principle that you're kind of recommending.
No, and what you just described is an important point. Everybody is different. AA has worked for millions of people. Uh, it I looked at their program pretty hard. I mean, I go to a church where they've got the nightly meetings,
Mm-mm.
and this just no, that the mental it wasn't for me, and I'll just leave it at that. And it is a good
Yeah.
program, it's better than good. It's a lifesaver for people, but it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, isn't it funny? I'm the person that benefited from AA that more than anybody that went to AA because my mum got sober
Right,
and raised me sober, right? So I'm the one that
right.
benefited the most from it. But then I now have an alternative to that program. It's quite funny, right? Because it just didn't work for me, and I wasn't going to do that either. Like hell no.
Yep.
But your advice is golden. So let me ask you this. So I think one thing people struggle is reaching out for help because you
Mhm.
have to. And Jeff said this on the previous call, and I don't want to give you the answer before he said it, but he made a great point. He said you got to swallow your pride. And it's a freaking hard thing to do, especially when you're male, to reach out for help and say, do you know what? I don't know how to do this. What I've been doing is not working. So what would you say to somebody who's kind of at that place where they know they've got a problem, but they're holding on to their pride, they're afraid to reach out for help? What would you say to them?
I would agree with Jeff, about swallowing your pride or admitting. I mean, we're all we all think we're big and tough and strong, and in many ways we are, but sometimes you get yourself into a situation, where you need, uh, someone to give you a hand, whether you're part of a team or whether you're a crew or whatever. So we do it through life, and this is maybe one of the most important things you're ever gonna do. You got a problem, you do it at work, or you've done it in your career, or you've done it in other areas of your life, and yeah, this is where the really tough part comes, is admitting to, the people close to you and your loved ones that, yeah, you got a problem and you gotta do it. And, it's critical for them to support you, and my family did, and that, you know so there's a team there, and then the group The discussions you guys have 2 days a week. I try to get in there, but it just I just never seemed to make it with Joe. But it you really maybe that's that little extra that gets you. That's that final log on the pile that lets you get over the hump, if you will, and get into an area where you can start to fix your problem.